Welcome to Generations. My name is Beverly Crosby and I will be your moderator today. Our topic is your bucket list. Today, our co-hosts are going to have a panel discussion talking about the importance of having one, how to write one, and how to maintain it and accomplish the things that you put down. So with that, get your pen and paper out and let's get started. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. Let me introduce you, Nadia Jordana. How are you today?
Real good. It's going to be a good show. I'm real interested in the subject.
And Midge Bubani.
Hello, nice to be here and see everyone.
Gloria Van Dementrout, how are you?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to it. Just great discussion today. It should be fun.
Yeah. David Lepaco, welcome.
Thanks. I think we're talking about bucket lists today, and I'd like to know how that term ever came into being in the first place. But
yeah, we're going to get into that. So, and then before we get started, I do want to say to the audience, normally we see Bob Johnston on as a co-host, and he is not with us due to some health issues that their family is having. So we're wishing Bob the very best. So with that, back to your question, David. Bucket list, this is what I looked up. It says the meaning is a number of experiences or achievements that a person hopes to have or accomplish during their lifetime. And then it says, why do we call it the bucket list? And this is interesting. From kick the bucket, which means to die, plus the list, a list of things to do before you die. These are a list of things to do before you die. The term was coined by American and British screenwriter Justin Zackham in his screenplay for the 2007 film The Bucket List. I've never seen the movie. Has anybody else?
Yeah, I have.
Well, oh,
really?
It was like Walter Matthau and wasn't it Walter Matthau?
I saw it too. And it was great. It was funny.
Yeah, it's a comedy.
Yeah, very funny.
I'm going to have to look.
It's reminding me, look at it again.
Okay, so let's talk about why we have it. Why do we have a bucket list? Well, because it can be inspirational for one thing, and it can keep us on track. Why else do you think, you have a bucket list?
I think as each of us get older, we really do. And actually, I started thinking of things like that when I was in my 40s. What will people say about us when we're gone? What can we leave behind for other people? And I know that's more along the lines of legacy, but it's all part of what can I accomplish with the years that I have left that'll make me feel like I've lived a more complete life.
That's a great description, Nadia. I think in addition, it's something that we want to do and have for a long time. For example, I had a trip I wanted to make since I was in 9th grade, which is a long time ago, and I wanted to go to Rome and Greece. And I got to do that, and it was just a fabulous trip, something that I had always wanted to do. And I think that's one thing that comes to mind when we talk about bucket lists, something we've wanted to do for whatever reason for a long time.
Yeah, I'm struck by the fact that when you ask a lot of really old people, that wouldn't be us, of course, but really old people, what they regret, it's often not what they did do, but what they didn't do. And the kind of missed opportunities. And I've tried to take that to heart and do things that that are almost a little out of my comfort zone, but I thought were things that would be worth doing, and I would always remember them. And I think that's served me well in many ways.
Midge, you were going to say something?
Midge?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think many of us, as we're living our lives, just kind of get involved in the day-to-day and just maybe not think ahead and think about our goals and I think, or interests that we have. And I think a lot of people don't have a bucket list because of that. They're just busy with their lives. So I think a bucket list can kind of narrow down what you really want out of life, and what you want to do, and where to channel your resources to achieve it. Because a lot of it is mine anyway. My things would take some financial planning and saving.
And I read somewhere that bucket list can be empowering. It actually gives you some control over your life, or you feel that you have a little more control over your life as well. Would you agree to that? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it helps us put things down on paper. And I think it really is important to put things down on paper, look at it in print, in your own handwriting, and see how you feel about it. So reach a little farther than you think, like Dave said about your comfort zone, because once you get the idea in your head that maybe you can do it in segments or portions or stages, but remember that it's not necessarily too late to do something just because you're a certain age. We have a friend, I think, Midge, I think you know her too, who was on this show a couple of weeks ago, I think she was, that did the Alcatraz swim at age 70.
Yeah.
And she completed it.
Yeah. And of course, some of the things don't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to involve swimming the channel from Alcatraz Island to San Francisco. Or, one of my bucket list things was I wanted to be able to run a marathon. And so that took several months of preparation. But I know somebody else who might be related to me, and on her bucket list was to do skydiving. And so that's something that you can manage in, a couple days, and at least have that experience. So it doesn't have to involve a huge investment of time or money or effort, but there has to be something beyond the everyday, the mundane, the, endlessly boring world that we can get into, that kind of routine.
That's well said, Dave, and Nadia too. To speak to your issues, planning for it can be something very small. It can be going somewhere and having an English tea, or a certain restaurant and having a lovely dinner, seeing a great movie. It can be something very, very small, but something that you've wanted to do. And like you say, it's never too late. We start things. I've started things incredibly late in my life. And I started writing then, and now my 7th book is just being published. So it's just something I never expected to do, and it turned out to be an incredible thing. So, and I watch other people doing these kinds of things too, and it's like you say, writing is a great idea. Once it's written down, it becomes more real. Think so?
I'm a real list person. So when I write it down, it has more meaning than when it's just flowing around in my head. And my son, just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about where we want to take a family trip. He asked me to prioritize he asked me, where do you want to go? I mean, where have you always wanted to go? So I really had to stop and prioritize just exactly what. And that's part of that bucket list too, I think, is prioritizing. Yeah, I'd like to do this, but probably never going to happen. And I think we have to be realistic too.
And do that.
I'm never going to jump out of an airplane. Never. That's not on my bucket list.
To that point too, for people who don't have a bucket list, here's just a few categories that you might be thinking about that might help you to think about what you want to put on your list. One would be travel, relationships, career, financial, entertainment, adventure, contribution, and creativity. So if if you don't have one, those are just some of the areas, and there are more. There's some pretty crazy ones out there too. Go ahead, Nadia.
You mentioned relationships, and I did put on my bucket list. And even though it's not necessarily a fun thing, but repairing a couple of broken relationships throughout a lifetime, those are things that, if at all possible, you'll feel better if you can do something about them before you're too old, or it's too late, or one or the other of you has died, or whatever it might be. But that's on my bucket list.
And as you said, or as David said too earlier, they're not always comfortable. The things on your list are not always comforting to you, but we kind of know, that there's something that's gnawing at us. We know we need to get it taken care of. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What were you going to say, Midge?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing.
Okay. Okay.
One thing, excuse me, Beverly. During the last year that we've been dealing with COVID, and the pandemic has been so terrible, we had a fabulous trip planned, my husband and I, that we had to cancel. And I was so disappointed in it. It was a cruise and to Ireland and Scotland. And I had my DNA done, as some of us have, I don't know, and discovered I have more Scotch-Irish than I realized. So I was really looking forward to this trip. Well, another year has gone by, and I don't know if we're going to be able to rebook that trip or not. And I really, really want to go. So I'm thinking of making a new bucket list and writing it down, and maybe it will happen. I don't know. Does anybody else have to cancel any trips over the last year?
I didn't have to cancel any, but I felt like the pandemic really put a big sock in the works. It just you just feel like, well, I can't go here, and I'm kind of wondering how long Europe is going to be closed too. They seem to be having more trouble than we are at the present time. So I think it's going to go on for a little bit, but I think there's hope. I feel very hopeful that things will open up again.
Okay, let's talk about why not, because people, it's easy to think of reasons why not to do something. And I read something, I thought this is interesting. It says, bucket lists make you travel for obligation, not pleasure. The truth is, though, that people change and their travel goals change. When you have a bucket list, you risk spending precious travel time on experiences you feel obligated to complete, not on experiences that you're craving at the moment. Now, that's not my feeling or my thoughts, but something I read about the reason not to have it. Do you think that has any merit for some people? Anybody? Yeah, Nadia.
That feels uncomfortable to me, because if you write a bucket list down and it's no longer what you want, you can just change it and update your bucket list.
Yeah, I think that bucket list has to be flexible, because your circumstances change, your interests change. I mean, that's part of life, changing. And I think if you're that rigid that you make a list and you got to finish it, then that's your problem.
Health issues come up, and we need to deal with those too and do what we're able to do. So when we say it's never too late, sometimes it feels like it. At least we get older and unable to travel as much as we did, or as extensively as we'd like to. But we can adjust that. Like you say, you change your bucket list, you adjust it down.
Yeah. I also suspect that sometimes when people have bucket lists, I get that feeling of obligation, which kind of hangs over you. But once you actually do whatever it is you had on the list, afterwards, often, more often than not, you're really grateful that you did this, even if initially it felt like a burden and an obligation. It's like, damn, I'm really glad I did that. That was a lot of fun, or that was really meaningful. But in the moment when you start, it can feel like a burden or like an obligation. But I think at the end, it's often a very different story.
It's really empowering at times. And, as we talked about before, here's just some crazy ideas, crazy bucket list ideas that, you can find anything on the web, right? Okay. So like cage dive with crocodiles in Darwin, climb a water tower, cross a glacier on foot, dive to a shipwreck. Has anybody, okay, those are pretty extreme, I would say, but some people have them. Has anybody had any crazy things on their list or still have on their list? Can you share anything like that? What's your craziest?
It's not that crazy, but it seems exhausting. I'd like to drive the Alaska highway.
Mm. Oh, what does that involve? I mean,
it's a lot longer and farther than people think. I suggested it
Yes.
to my husband, and he's not real crazy about the idea. I mean, I know my father did it once, 5 days straight, but that was day and night driving. So it's a long, long drive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is it over glaciers or things like that, or windy or hilly, or just very long?
Just very long, and through the mountains in a lot of places. Yeah, up out through Canada and into Alaska.
Sounds beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hate to end up being crazy about in any way, both to myself and probably to other people. But when I look back on graduating from college, and I realized I'd never been outside the United States, and so part of my mental bucket list was that I should do that. And so a couple of years after graduating, I had a little bit of money saved, and I just booked a flight to Madrid and bought a 7-week Eurail pass. And this is before email, before, you're really, when you get there, you're kind of out of touch. And I wandered around Europe by myself with a frame backpack for 7 weeks. And looking back, it was kind of crazy, but it was one of the best things I ever did, because there were so many experiences I had, not all of them pleasant experiences, but ones that, were just served me so well in terms of getting a sense of the world and who I was. And I never regret that, even though objectively looking at it now, it was kind of crazy to do. I mean, I just can't imagine I actually did that, but.
Oh, that's exciting. What a wonderful thing to do. Do you know, however, I've got kind of a new issue to bring up. I think it's important as you get older to give up regrets. I no longer have regrets. There are things that I haven't been able to do in my life. And so I adjust that to do easier, simpler things. For example, my husband and I are looking at taking a very little trip, just a few days, looking at waterfalls in southern Minnesota area. There are a number of waterfalls, and a trip was designed. I saw something in the paper about it a while ago, and I have to check that again. We were thinking of doing that this summer, but going to see a dozen waterfalls over just a few day period. And I thought, how neat, because we can drive, we can walk as much as we can. But while I would have loved to spend 7 weeks touring Europe, just like you did, David, I'm afraid it wasn't in my list.
Well, what about people who, I mean, we're all, in that age range where, our bodies don't always cooperate with what our minds want us to do. So some people may think, okay, I can't do this, I can't do that. Kind of to your point, Gloria, what would you suggest to somebody who is very limited physically? Where do they start? Maybe they don't have a bucket list, or maybe they've tossed their old one away. Do you have any ideas you can share that might be helpful to them?
I think, and I'm running into that myself because of stamina and lack of periodically. It's just more important to pre-plan and not blindly go into, I still have a tendency to bite off more than I can chew, and whoa, why did I get myself into this? But as I go along, I'll pre-plan better, and I think that's necessary.
Yeah, I think doing the research is really important, because like even hikes, there's like easy, moderate, and tough.
Right.
If you get to a point where, you know, at my age with my bum knee right now, I have to really watch where, you know, what kind of situations I get into. So yeah, so I think you have to really do your research.
I agree. Very, very important. And looking at where you want to stay, look it up and check your travel agent or bureaus or whoever you have contact with for making travel arrangements. Make your reservations ahead and know how far you can go. My husband and I talk about it a lot, and we'll travel so many miles in a day, and that's it. We'll stop and have a nice dinner and stay in a nice place. And that's part of the whole trip too, and part of the excitement of it.
What about financially? There are, you know, for some people, they're on a limited income as they get older, especially. You know, they may say, well, we can't do this. We can't go to the play. We can't, you know, we can't spend the money on travel. We can't, you know, what kind of ideas would you have for them? What things to do?
I think one thing to remember, and I have to remind myself of this one, if you are, let's say it's a weekend like you're talking about, Gloria, or a trip, even a big trip, it doesn't matter. I have in the past found myself with the tendency of, oh, that restaurant's way too expensive. Let's not do that. Let's have a sandwich instead or whatever. Well, that might be beautiful, the sandwich by a waterfall. But also, if you've really wanted to do that restaurant, I think there was one in Rome, and I've never forgotten it. It was a beautiful restaurant, and my husband and I decided to bite the bullet and go to that incredible restaurant in Rome, and it was way too expensive, but I've never forgotten that evening. So I think you put some thought into it, and how memorable will it be, and how will it affect that?
We've been talking a lot about travel and things like that. I love the suggestion, and Beverly, I don't know if you gave that list or Nadia did, but a list of things changing relationships, very important in healing relationships, starting to do new things. I mentioned my new career of writing, but I mean, it can be anything. You can join a choir, or take up painting or drawing, or take a class for anything that's been interesting. That one, taking a class, being a lifelong learner is very important to me and always has been. But for someone else who's looking for something new, taking a class in something that might interest you in some way is a good idea, I think.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so we have about a few minutes left here. Can you tell each one of you, can you tell us maybe one or two things that are on your bucket list that you would, if you could only choose one or two that you achieve, what would they be?
I'd like to visit the Greek islands and Greece and that area of Europe. I've been to Europe once. I'd like to go back one more time.
I'd like to visit some of the national parks out west, particularly the ones in Utah. I've been to the big ones like Yellowstone and Glacier, but I've never visited the number that are right in Utah. So I'd like to do that. And I'd also love to go to Maine. I have this romantic notion of Maine. I don't know.
I've never really been to New England, so Maine is a good idea. And given that my last name is Suomalainen, Finnish, I've never been to Finland, and that would be a really nice sort of back to my roots sort of experience. And then like Gloria, I've written a textbook, not fiction as she's written, but that's in its 5th edition. But I would really like to try writing fiction as opposed to nonfiction.
Oh, yes.
And I have no idea if I'm up for that, if I'm capable of that, but I sort of want to try it out.
You should try it.
Absolutely, do it. No, not just try it, do it, Dave. If you want some inspiration, let me know.
Well, you are one of my inspirations, so.
Yeah, that's good. I too want to finish the 4th book in my mystery series, so I want to get that one done. So I'll have 8 books in my whole repertoire, and I want to go back and do that cruise to Scotland and Ireland. I think we're still healthy enough to be able to do it. And we can walk as much as we can, and doing it on a cruise is the best way for us because we don't have to do all the walking that you can walk as much as you want to, but we're on the easy tours, Midge.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here today and sharing such valuable information. Thank you, Nadia and Midge, Gloria and David. And viewers, I hope you had your pen and paper handy. If you haven't started your list, I hope you do. And if you have a bucket list, take another look at what you can accomplish. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Generations. Here's just a few categories that you might be thinking about that might help you to think about what you want to put on your list. One would be travel, relationships, career, financial, entertainment, adventure, contribution, and creativity. So if you don't have one, those are just some of the areas, and there are more. There's some pretty crazy ones out there too.